Folks, welcome to this session. I'm Mark Schreiber of Safeguards Consulting. I'm going to be just facilitating this panel discussion. So it's going to be our panelists doing most of the talking, but we've designed this not as just pure PowerPoint presentation, but really a lot of engagement with the Q&A section. So we'll get to that pretty quickly after we talk about some key foundational elements. We're addressing specifically about modern credentials, and specifically the role of a traditional card credential, smart card, versus a mobile credential, which we know there's many different solutions out there in deployment. Definitely a paradigm shift. We're going to talk about a lot of pros and cons between that. But to start off, we have 3 different manufacturers and also 1 end user talking about this. So we'll let them introduce themselves, their company, and their role before we get into their specific slides. Garrett, will you start first?
All right, my name is Garrett Guess. I'm the IT project manager for Heritage Medical Associates, local.
And Scott?
Sure. My name is Scott Lindley. I'm with Farpointe Data, and I'm very pleased to be here.
Dean Forchas, HID Global. I'm the Consultant Relations Manager for North America. My job is to support you folks. I know most of you, but if anybody here I've not met you, please engage, drop a business card, because I want to get to know you.
I'm Dave Weinbach. I'm Manager of Identity and Product Innovation for Lindley too.
Thank you. And so we're going to give them each a quick intro slide to talk about their perspectives and their solutions, but we specifically had set this up, Ray set this up so that we can also have an end user perspective and a real world deployment. So we're going to start with that first with Garrett. Garrett with Heritage Medical, if you'll explain how you rolled out mobile credentials and your experiences with that.
Sure, so as far as us rolling out mobile credentials, one of our biggest success factors was to get our physicians to ditch their physical keys, because they don't want to carry badges, they just want to get in as easily as possible, so that was the biggest success factor. So in our deployment, obviously we've got to find something that was easy for them. So with mobile credentials, they always have their phone and they get in easily. And with that, it's easy to say that they've been very, very happy with the product. I mean, they find very little issues with it. And one of the biggest cons, really, there's really very few cons that I've found so far. The biggest thing is just getting them to actually download the app. It's as simple as entering a registration code and you're good to go, but sometimes that's difficult for some reason. So, and with that, one of the biggest things we didn't really expect to happen, but we found very useful, is actually, so right now we have 17 locations and we're under a lot of construction as far as renovating suites, buildings, all that kind of stuff. We actually found very useful for our construction crew. So the superintendents will kind of get with us and it's like, hey, we need this vendor to have access to this space for this amount of time. All right, no problem. What's their email address? So we'll push their credential to them, set their credentials to expire, and they are just good to go. That's been very positive with that, because otherwise we'd have to, get with the HR department to actually give them physical badges, and that just takes forever for whatever reason. So.
And would you explain your current use of physical card credentials?
Yes. Yes. So as far as physical is concerned, we have about 750 employees. Our standard staff employees just use their HID COS card to get into their space. And then our administration and physicians use the mobile credential. So we give everybody a card, but like I mentioned before, not everybody uses it. But that's kind of our breakdown there. So we have about 150 mobile users at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Garrett. So we have a sampling of 3 different solution providers here who supply both mobile credentials and card credentials. So we're going to have them go through their specific approaches and talk about those solutions. So first up, Farpointe. We're going alphabetically by company name.
So my name's Scott Lindley, as I mentioned. Farpointe Data, we're a manufacturer of readers and credentials for electronic access control. There was a question about that. At the most recent ISC West, we introduced our Connect platform. Connect is a solution, reader and credential solution. Makes use of both mobile access credentials that exist on a smartphone, so Apple or a Android-based smartphone, as well as physical access credentials, for example, DZ4 EV2, EV1, MIFRA Classic. It'll read all of those. A couple of advantages with the mobile compared, say, to the with our mobile solution. First and foremost, I think it's very easy to order. It's designed to complement the existing distribution structure that you see today with electronic access control, meaning that end users are supported by their dealer and integration partners. They buy their product from access control system manufacturers, who then purchase their readers and card solutions from companies like us, Farpointe. These OEM access control system manufacturers, they are our customers. That's who we're serving directly. That's who we designed this product first and foremost for. It adds value to their solution by giving them a mobile platform that they can provide to their integration channel and their end users. Secondly, with our solution, there's really no additional system integration work required. Our mobile access credentials are hosted on our cloud. It's the Farpointe cloud. They're accessed via a registration key certificate that we issue in PDF form, so it's electronic. It can also be printed if you want it printed. It's really up to you. The individual end users, after that's enrolled into the access system, just as you would any other badge, it has a format, it has a facility code, it has an ID. By the way, those are issued by the access control system manufacturer. They tell us what they want. We don't tell them what we'll do. You simply pull those down onto their handsets. The readers themselves, they're available with, their Wiegand output, so they function with most every access panel around. They can also be ordered with ABA Track 2, so magstripe emulation, as well as OSDP. I don't know how much integration work there is to hook it to an input on an access panel. Not much. It's something that everybody's familiar with. User privacy, we work really hard to maintain that. We don't require any portal accounts. So to register the app that stores the mobile access credentials, you simply need the handset's telephone number. It opens up a secure pipe to our cloud and allows the mobile access credentials to be dropped directly into that wallet. That wallet app can store multiple access credentials. If you stopped by our booth yesterday, you saw Steven Shepard's phone. I think he has like 30 mobile access credentials operating inside the wallet. It reminds me a little bit of the security chief, say at a school or a corporation that might have, or the Pentagon, might have 15 or 20 keys on their key ring or access cards to get around a site. It could store a boatload of credentials. And then security, we work really hard to make certain that it utilizes state-of-the-art security, TLS, certificate pinning, AES. There's multiples of layers of encryption involved. Physical access credentials, you know, there are a couple of advantages there. They're always on. They're passive. They receive their energy from the readers. You can't say that for mobile. I mean, the mobile credential, it utilizes the cell phone battery. It makes use of BLE communication, so Bluetooth low energy. If your battery's dead, you don't have access to your credential. Physical access credentials, they can support multiple frequencies. They can be built with different chips and different circuits inside the cards. You can essentially, or the tags, you can design a credential. Say, for example, we have one of our examples is a transmitter solution, 433 megahertz, 125 and 1356, all in a single credential. It's more difficult to do that with a mobile phone where you have basically 2.4 gigahertz with BLE. So if you're looking to connect with legacy systems, it may very well be that your physical access credentials are your best choice. Every card is created equal. You can't say that about every smartphone that's created. Some smartphones, BLE functionality works better than others. I don't know any other way to say it. If you take a look at how the antennas are laid out inside the smartphones, if you take a look at how the iOS handles the BLE functionality or the OS, it's different really from each and every handset manufacturer. The best, in my experience, that I've seen, this is simply my experience, is probably the Apple devices. And the best phone that we've used so far in testing is the 8S. Now, the Samsung phones seem to work pretty well as well. We've had the opportunity to play with some of the Chinese phones. We won't get into it. They're value oriented, you know. If that's what you're interested in, well, that's what you're going to get. Finally, and a real important piece, one of the things that mobile credentialing is going to bring to us that I think that we all have to think about is quite often the organization does not own that smartphone. They're not issuing each of its employees a smartphone to bring to work. Rather, that mobile access credential, which may belong to that organization, is putting it onto the employee's piece of equipment. An advantage with an access credential, a physical access credential, so a traditional credential, is the entity owns it. So that end user, that business, they own that credential. And that gives that owner specific rights. Just a small little area to think about.
All right.
Great, thank you.
This very much. Excellent point, Scott. So next up, we have HID Global. Dean, if you'll stand up and
I
cover
want
your
to start by
solutions.
thanking Scott, because this space is a defined space, and he covered quite a few of my points already. Our system overview, there is a portal. The portal is the interaction point for the manager to log in and issue or revoke credentials. They go to the mobile device, the individual accepts or rejects that credential. We can't clandestinely slide a credential on someone's phone. Once it's on their phone, we can take it away. Not we, the manager. The readers, NESC reader, which is our standard flagship line, been selling those exclusively for about 5 years. There's a 2.4 gigahertz radio that needs to be added either at the factory or now in the field. That is something that's new, that we're able to field upgrade those, and I'll talk about how that happens in just a second. And once all of that is in place, you have the ability to use either a card or a reader. Best practice, can I assign the exact same ID number in a phone that is the card to be able to keep down programming? We certainly can, not best practice. The idea is Jeff Smith gets a phone mobile ID as well as a card mobile ID. That way, if he loses his card, we shut the card off, the phone still works. Going on to the pros and cons. Read range, it's an obvious one. We've fought, especially with our CS technology, it's very, very reduced read range. Lots of reasons for it, there's just no way around it. I mean, we're getting a couple inches. You get, between the BLE or near field communication, with that, we're anywhere from, and it's an adjustable read range, anywhere probably out to the BLE range of 20, 30 feet. Dialed back in most scenarios because you don't need or want that much. Certainly within a building, you'd be unlocking doors unintentionally. Ease of issuance. Some of these are obvious points and or already been covered, like multiple credentials. A very important one is Reader Manager, something fairly new, handles a lot of the problems for us. What it is it's a free app that's downloaded, and it allows the technician to go in and actually load keys, change keys, do different things to the reader that normally needed a config card in order to accomplish. Those are going away. All of this is controlled by the person that has login rights to the portal. That's the end user. Now, in days gone by, HID really didn't have touch to the end user. Many resellers didn't want us to know who the end user is, and that's fine. We sell our products through many channels, including, ADI and ScanSource, et cetera. But there's pros and cons with everything. Now that we have exposure to that end user, we can deliver something that was covered in a different session. What happens if we find a vulnerability in our system? How do we communicate that to the field? It's been an age-old problem in the manufacturing, in the security especially. We're not going to put it on the website, announce to the world, we have a hole and here's how to exploit it, but we want to get that message out to anybody who's using our products to say, you need to patch, or you need to do this, you need to change this wire, whatever it is, to mitigate that risk. We now have touch, direct touch to those end users via that portal. So that's a good thing. Other part about Reader Manager, Our readers have a lot of configuration. Days gone by with procs, 125 kilo procs, you wired it up, you're pretty much done. You might have a config card to maybe change the beeper, shut it off. There's a lot of settings in there now. So with Reader Manager, you can connect to the phone, you get that reader set up the way you like it, and you can store it as a template. You can share that template to a technician working on the other side of the globe, so that if it's a international organization, they want all their readers set up the same way, we can ensure that they're set up the exact same way. And that privilege of being able to get into those readers, as I said, was controlled by the person that logs in, time of day, day of week. I'm going to give Ed the ability to configure my readers for 2 hours. Or as soon as Ed, the technician, comes back and says, I'm done, boom, his app no longer connects to my readers. So we're very excited about that. Cons, pretty obvious. Everybody wants that photo ID still. I mean, a lot of corporations still have that. So, how are you going to do that with the phone? You're not. You're still going to need some sort of piece of plastic, whether it has technology in it or not, different conversation. Photo ID is still an accessory. Dead batteries, got covered. It requires a smartphone. Believe it or not, I come into some organizations with people with as much gray hair as I have, and they say, I've got this flip phone and I'm not getting rid of this baby. We'll tell you what, you're using a card because I can't help you on the phone. And that personal property, that bring your own device, putting a credential on someone's personal phone. If it's a company issued phone, probably no problem. But when it's a personal phone, it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? My boss wants to put something on the phone so I can go to work for him. So we have issues there. And it's just like any technology, it's not perfect in every scenario, but there is certainly a trend, a overwhelming trend, and some of this is generational. And I was talking to somebody, I don't see the individual out in the hallway, about personal privacy, and it seems my generation and Big Brother, and I don't want anybody to know where I am, seems to resonate at my age level. Millennials, my kids download apps called, Find Friends and all these other things. They seem to have far less problem about, using their phone, personal property, or the fear of the boss tracking me somehow, like a phone is going to be more vulnerable than the car going through the building, or that I took too long of a break. We just don't see that on college campuses. We just don't see that with the younger generations. When I'm meeting with end users, the people that I get pushback are the people kind of more, born in my generation. So it's just an interesting cultural thing to, be aware of. So that's my, yes, sir.
One other thing that I would add to both people's list is union issues. I did a boatyard once that wanted the union, the timestamp to begin at the gate.
Certainly.
So, and I've done that more than once. I had that issue more than once. So when you clocked into the gate, you're clocking in to work. And there was a 30-minute difference times 3,000 employees. So that was a
certainly. Yeah, so many of these arguments go back and forth between card and phone. I get this all the time. What if I lose my phone? And of course I want to be a smart aleck and say, what if you lose your card? We've kind of got that same scenario. Somebody has to go shut it off. But actually with the phone scenario, actually with the phone scenario, it's less vulnerable. Number one, the person's going to notice they lost their phone a whole lot quicker. And number two, I can't shut off that access card that's just sitting there, not the card itself. I have to go to the access system and turn off its rights. With this system, I can do it either way, usually both. I can go and actually shut off that credential because I have a connection to it through the cloud. So everything you said, absolutely. But generally speaking, the rules and guidelines that go around cards, they're the same with mobile credentials.
Thank you, Dean.
Yes.
What I really liked is you're not only addressing the personal privacy, you're also addressing a lot of the other factors about rolling out mobile credentials that are different within an organization. So thank you for identifying that. So next up is David. David's going to cover his solutions before we go into the general Q&A session. David.
So executive summary, what they said. That's right. There is a lot of commonality across all mobile solutions in terms of, for example, pros and cons. So Linnell's offering in this area is called Blue Diamond Mobile. It's a family of readers and then an app for iOS, Android, and Apple Watch. And it's also being incorporated by Assa Abloy into one of their Wi-Fi lock sets. So you'll be able to use the mobile credential across not only the reader family, the wired readers, but also in wireless mode. Some of the advantages of smart cards versus mobile. Mobile has an incredibly long range. I mean, in some cases, we've seen more than 50 feet. Now, that's a blessing and a curse, but as a lot of the long-timers in this industry know, one of the use cases that's been hardest to achieve is parking gates. And although we didn't set out to do this, the mobile has been a real blessing in that area because it solves a problem that has never really been satisfactorily solved in this area. You know, needing active credentials has always been a nightmare to manage for your end users. In this case, the battery issue is handled by the customer, not by the end user. It's handled by the individual card holder because they want their phone on. So that's that long range is a double-edged sword. These solutions are all adjustable, so you can dial the range down for most applications, but in some applications it's actually an advantage. Again, most of these have been mentioned in one sense or another, but the analogy I always use for credentials is if you leave your badge at home and you notice it halfway into your drive, what do? Nobody turns around to get their badge. If you leave your phone at home and you notice it halfway in the drive, a lot of people will turn around and get their phone. So one of the advantages of a mobile credential is you're more likely to have it on your person. Because of the way people deal with smartphones today, they want that phone with them 24/7, especially like in a student population in a university. There's no way they're not going to have their phone. So it's actually more readily available than a plastic badge. Savings on card replacement. The cool thing about a mobile credential is it's a virtual credential, not a physical credential. So you can revoke the credential and reapply it to a new phone. You can revoke the credential and reapply it to a new person. One of the things that is pretty cool then is it's great for short-term users, such as contractors or visitors. So you don't need to buy 5,000 visitor credentials. If you have 5,000 visitors a year, you only need enough for the number of concurrent visitors. So we use something called a pool model. I think some of these other companies do as well, where you don't buy individual credentials, you buy a pool of credentials, and within that pool, your users are free to revoke and reissue. So we call this the enterprise model, meaning we don't micromanage our customers. We let them do what they want to do with the pool of credentials that they've licensed. So some of the other advantages is the cost of printing badges is significant for some customers, and consumables on printers and maintenance on printers, things like that. The wow factor, this is kind of like the same story with biometrics. There's lots of use cases, but one of them is I want a really cool reader, or I want a really cool thing that when I bring customers in, when I bring contractors in, when I bring prospective clients in, they're impressed with my technological prowess. And these days, mobile provides that functionality. So even where it's not widely deployed, there's a use for it. And then, again, mentioned before, is the ability to remotely revoke or disable a credential, where before, if somebody took a badge with them, there's nothing you can do about that. Badge is in circulation forever. You don't know where it's going. You can turn it off in your access control system, but for all you know, somebody could turn it back on as either by issuing the same badge number to a different person, or by making a mistake, or by resetting something. So with mobile technology, you can literally take that off of their phone and it's gone. It's vaporized. So we allow the configuration of the system to issue the same mobile credential with a new badge ID when it's reissued. So you don't have the same number used for the next person. Those are some of the advantages of mobile. But there are still advantages of a smart card. One is that it's still the fastest technology out there. Like you get, it's not the longest range, but when you get in range, it's bang and it goes. This has been mentioned also, but it's probably, I think it's a major barrier to adoption, is the fact that plastic badges are not only electronic access credentials, they're also badges, right? It's something that identifies you in the organization. And so I put crowdsourced security. when you have a badge around your neck and you walk around, when I walk around on the 3rd floor here and I try and grab lunch and I don't have one of these, the guy next to me goes, hey, are you in this conference? That doesn't happen with a mobile credential. So there is an advantage to having that plastic badge if you wear it. If you don't wear it, that advantage goes out the window. So in some organizations, that's a big deal. No dead battery scenario, we've all mentioned it. I think that's actually becoming less of a factor. Smartphone batteries are getting better, and more so, the smartphone is so important to the users, especially younger users. It's so much part of their daily life that they don't let the batteries go dead anymore. They have a charger on their desk, they have a charger in their car. I think 5 years ago this was a bigger, and yeah, they have a battery in their pocket. So this issue is kind of taking care of itself just because of the need to be connected 24/7 with your smartphone regardless of whether you're using it as a credential. But credentials still don't need a battery. And then again, mentioned before is you don't need a phone, and I took this from a slightly different perspective, not the flip phone perspective, which is also valid, but some environments you're not allowed to carry a phone for security reasons, and that's another use case for badges. So this is just some of the advantages of each technology, and of course the one thing that nobody has said is that you don't have to decide. You can have a mixed environment with both. So people that have to go in areas that don't allow smartphones, give them a badge. People that have flip phones, give them a badge. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of each, but you can have a mixed model.
Thank you, David. That's a very good point. And I love that you've covered specifically not only the license pool, but also specifically addressing that it's a mix. It's not one or the other. A blend and hybrid is definitely the good approach with that. And so what we wanted to do with this session is not just cover foundational items, but specifically address lessons learned. Because mobile isn't new, mobile's been around, we've deployed it in many different locations. So now this is a case where we really can start to get some feedback from what has happened in that case. So 3 specific lesson learned areas I'd like to touch on before we go to the question and answer is, oh, go ahead.
Just real quick, is it ever a con that you don't have a cellular signal?
Yes.
Only at times of provisioning, not being able to get a credential because you have no signal. Once the credential is downloaded on the phone, a signal is no longer required.
It's all Bluetooth?
I believe that's true with all.
It's all
Bluetooth, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't even know if you need a cell phone signal ever. I think it's just an internet connection, correct?
Certainly. You need a cloud connection of some sort in order to get the credential from the cloud. Once it's on your phone, it exists there without it.
One you've got up here is duplication of the card, like this.
Can you get a microphone here?
You can't. It's difficult. Don't talk.
Now talk. It's difficult to duplicate a smart card on a device. This product right here called KeyMe, you know, Dean, and I have had many discussions about this. I was able to make a MasterCard at a Kroger grocery store with this thing. And you know, everybody knows about you buying one of these on Amazon or whatever, but this is in the stores now. Bed Bath & Beyond's have them, convenience food stores have them, where you can walk down right. This was a MasterCard for a university. And I duplicated it in 10 minutes. Prox 125, yeah, 125. So yeah, that's an easy, and that's the reason why I say that once you put that smartphone on, it can't be, now at least, it can't be duplicated.
Well, Jim, I would add to that is saying the ability of using mobile credentials is you can upgrade the levels of security and encryption versus being fixed with a card credential. That's a good point.
So a couple clarifying questions that I wanted to be clear on is, are the readers OSDP going back to the first discussion this morning that 3 of you were on? And on Farpointe and HID, the management system, are manufacturers pulling that into their software suite? Linnell's done it on their own. Because again, I think an objection from a management standpoint would be, now I've got 2 software suites I've got to log into and maintain.
Certainly. So for HID, the OSDP question, the answer is yes. You cannot buy a BLE reader that doesn't have the ability to go with OSDP. That's an option to turn on or off. So our OSDP module supports both Wiegand and OSDP. Your second question again was management?
Can they pull your management suite into their software?
Yeah, so the integration, we have an SDK, I believe Linnell, a couple others. So the answer is some yes, some no. You need to check on a individual basis.
Sure. To address the OSDP question, yes, the Connect readers can be ordered with an OSDP connection. Number two is the question of the management portal. We have a cloud solution. It's really, how should I say, it's not a portal account, so there's nothing for the end user, integrator, or system manufacturer to maintain. Rather, we provide them a registration key certificate that gives them access directly to our cloud, where they can pull the credential down that they have ordered specifically for that end user. So it's very similar to how you'd see a standard traditional access control credential being delivered today. Is that clear?
No.
No?
What I heard you say, it's still two interfaces. You have to interface it into your system to issue a credential.
So what we do is when we generate a credential, it's no different than when we generate a physical credential. We receive a purchase order from an access control system manufacturer for a specific range of credentials. Well, it might be one credential, but for a range of credentials. It'll be a specific format, a specific credential type, specific facility code, ID range. We'll program that into, we'll take that order, generate a work order, and we'll program it on our production floor. In that data into each specific individual credential, bundle them up, label them, box them, ship them. Eventually they get to the customer. That's how credentials are handled. Yeah. So we do the same thing with mobile access credentials. Essentially, we'll receive a purchase order for them. We will program them, so we'll generate them at our facility on a computer. It saves it to our cloud. It's Microsoft Azure. So we save it in the Azure cloud. Then we issue a companion registration key certificate. So it's a little different than what other people are doing. A key certificate for each individual credential that's saved in the cloud. Those credentials, each of those registration key certificates are tied to specific credential data. So ID number 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are sent then to the individual end users where they can be distributed just as would be a standard access credential. They can use that registration key certificate then to pull those specific credentials down onto their smartphone.
So 1,000 cards, you have to have 1,000 email addresses to send to?
No, you'd have 1,000, it could be one email address. Maybe you'd print them out. Maybe you would send them out to it via email. Yes, you would have to send them out in some form or fashion, just as you would distribute a standard credential today.
David, I think you had a comment also, and if you don't mind, stand up when you're using the microphone. No problem. We have to make sure the camera can see you.
So I think you guys probably should talk later and clarify that piece, but just from a Linnell perspective, on your two questions, the readers themselves do Wiegand, OSDP, and F2F, including OSDP secure channel right out of the box. Same part number. That's the nice thing about these modern microprocessor devices. They can do a lot. You don't need different ordering options. On your second question, I just want to explain a little bit what Linnell's doing with, for example, HID. When we implemented mobile credentials, we decided to do it in a way that we think fits with our value prop to customers, which is an open solution. So we developed a generic mobile credential issuance capability in OnGuard. And then we developed plugins for 3 different mobile credential solutions. We developed a plugin for HID mobile access, we developed a plugin for Allegiant Aptique Mobile, and we developed a plugin for Linnell Blue Diamond Mobile. They all work the same. You basically set up your server, the cloud server. Once you've done that, you can name the service, and then when you go to issue a credential, you can say, issue a HID credential to the cloud, issue a Linnell credential to the cloud. So we can tie it to badge types in OnGuard and have badge types for different. So we have some customers that have both HID mobile access in some buildings and Linnell Blue Diamond Mobile in others, and they can issue it from On Guard transparently. They don't need to worry about this. They could actually just say it's for the southeast campus or for the north campus, and the system will figure out which cloud service to issue to. And similarly, both credential types can coexist on the phone at the same time.
All right, we'll hold off on questions when we get to that section. Again, specifically lessons learned applications on that, so we can get that for the audience before they leave today. We've clearly been deploying mobile developments, and we have an end user here. When you're actually going through the process of deploying mobile and you only have mobile available and no badges, when it comes to the personnel security, what have we learned about actually giving the ability to challenge individuals, because we now are able to know whether they belong to the organization, or we don't know because we don't have the traditional card. Garrett, would you start first and how you address that, or trying to address that in your organization?
Sure. So like I mentioned before, all of our standard staff just have their ID badges, and that is for physical security and to know like who's supposed to be back behind the counters and whatnot. So we have our physical badges, but for whatever reason, the doctors still don't like those. They don't want to wear them. So we kind of like, whatever, here's your phone and you're happy. So exactly. So, so as far as end users badge all the way, and you kind of touched on the fact earlier about with the end users that we don't manage their cell phones. It's kind of a tricky situation, like they're not our users' they're not our cell phones. We don't pay for them, therefore it can be kind of tricky to ask for that on their phones. For the people we put it on, they've not complained one bit, but there is that kind of question out there at times. But to recap, everybody still has their ID badges. Doctors don't wear them. So.
Right. And I love the example that you have about that remote provisioning, right? You're able to quickly and remotely give access to someone, whether it's temporary use, contractor, or vendor use, from your own computer desk.
Yes.
That you can do in mobile that you can't do within a smart card environment. So that's a definite value you found, isn't it?
Yes.
So with the challenge issue with smart mobile credentials, have you found anything from the field and deployments where you saw this is a good way to address this when they're doing a mostly mobile environment? Anybody had any good lessons learned from the industry yet? David, please.
I have a bad lesson learned, which is pretty much what you said, which is that most people today are still issuing a plastic badge, and then the mobile credential is a convenience badge that's on top of that. I don't think we have too many companies yet that have gone and really fully leveraged mobile. I think that is an issue that may have some technological innovation in the next few years to try and, is there more that you can do with a phone to emulate a flash pass, not just emulate a card? And I think that's an area of innovation right now.
Excellent.
So I was at a site that solved it, I don't know, solved it, but attempted to solve it in a very different way, kind of creative. They have a fairly large screen TV above the main entrance, and with video verification, whether you use your badge or your phone, your stored picture comes up. And so it's kind of either an embarrassment thing, or B, anyone who happens to be looking, and Steve's at the door, and he holds this card up and a blonde woman's picture comes up, it gives that opportunity to make that challenge. So they did it kind of like, I don't know how many people back in the day, the retail stores sometimes would have a security camera and then just have the monitor up there to let people, potential thieves, know that you're being watched. And so this is kind of on that same vein, you're being watched.
I think that's great. Good picture verification in addition to that public display use. Did you have a comment about that?
Sure. A lesson learned, share that, is BLE devices are fundamentally long-range devices. You give up to 300 feet of range. That range presents some opportunities and some challenges. So if you take a look at parking applications, fantastic. It's a natural. But also, if you have 300 feet of range, or if you have a reader set at maximum range, what we found is sometimes employees like to play with their long-range credentials or their mobile access credentials. So they'll be clicking away at their desk, maybe they're on a phone call, just playing with it, something of that nature. Well, the reader's receiving that and opening that door, of course unintentionally. So with the read range, it's very, very sensitive with these devices to make certain that the range is appropriate for each specific reader, for each specific location.
Great. So now we'll go to questions, and I'll save the other lesson learned question for later if we need it. The one in the back, go ahead.
How do you handle on mobile credentials multi-partition cards that store more information than just the access rights?
We're working on it.
I think there's actually an easier answer than that.
Dave, would you mind standing up?
Sorry. I think the easy answer to that is that the phone is the ultimate multi-partition card where you can have multiple apps. So it's not, I don't think it's necessary to fold all of that into the mobile credential application. You can have different apps. One of the things that we see customers doing is we provide our mobile application two different ways. One is we provide an app in the App Store that's a complete app for emulating a badge. But we also supply an SDK to developers that allow them to incorporate Blue Diamond mobile credentials into a larger app. This is particularly something that's popular in the university space, where they typically have a student app, or in some corporations where they have a corporate app. Then you can actually build the mobile credential technology. I know HID does the same, where you can build the mobile credential technology into an app that's more of a complete employee experience, visitor experience, or student experience app. So that's another way to handle that.
So a little less glib. The CIOS vault, where the credential goes, it has the capacity, certainly the memory capacity, to hold a fingerprint template, for instance. It's just we're not quite there putting that stuff in.
Great. Question back, if you mind standing up also. So
yeah, when you talked about read range being pretty large, are those omnidirectional or directional? Like when you came up in and out a gate at a car parking, would you open up both gates if you were close?
Yeah, great question. As far as, that was a lesson learned for us, early deployments. We were reading BLE credentials on the other side of the sheetrock wall. And so the mounting plate, if you ever pull off a HID BLE reader, you'll see a copper foil on the back of the mounting plate, which is intended to make the eyeball, if you will, look forward out the face only of it. So yes, having that 360-degree range, A, we have to control it. B, the read range being adjustable is the other thing. We have two modes of interaction. Once marketing people call it twist and go. You engage the accelerometer for the long-range Bluetooth type of read. We have a shorter read range called tap and go, which you basically come up and we call it tap, so you get either your phone close or literally touch the reader. For things like turnstiles, you wouldn't want twist and go. Somebody 8 people back in line would get everybody out of sync if they opened that gate. I was kind of surprised because I thought how cool twist and go was, and maybe set it at like 3 to 6 feet and how great that'd be to walk up. General adoption, corporate America, they have the ability, they shut off twist and go on all interior doors. They maybe start out with it, and in a matter of a few days, those get shut off. Twist and go at the front door. It's an interesting angle. The ADA, you're in a wheelchair, you've got Parkinson's, you have upward mobility issues. This Bluetooth on the cell phone is a godsend for those individuals. But outside of that, interior doors, tap and go.
Dean, since you opened that subject up, that was one of the lessons learned questions that I had, was about the activation, right? Touching a button, a gesture, so on and so forth. So thank you for covering that for HID Global. David, how have you addressed the actual activation of a mobile credential?
Yeah, so when I talk to end users about mobile credentials, usually I tell them the trick with Bluetooth is not opening doors. The trick is not opening doors, right? Because of the long range that Scott mentioned, the nightmare scenario is you walk down a hall and it's click, 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 click as you walk by the door. So there's a technical term for this. It's called signaling intent. And this is probably one of the fundamental areas of research right now at our research center, UTCU's research center, is how to signal intent, meaning how does the reader and the phone combination know that I want to go through that door and not that door, especially when the doors are in close proximity. So we have a number of ways, but to be honest, this is the fastest changing part of our technology. It's evolving on a monthly basis. When we first came out with it, and our philosophy was to always err on the side of security over convenience. In this new technology, what we don't want is we don't want doors opening when they shouldn't. We made the decision that we would rather inconvenience the customer initially to avoid that, to ensure that we understand their intent. So the initial attempt to understand intent was we show a list of readers in range and you tap the one on the screen that is the one you want to go through. Recently we introduced something called Pathways, which uses a combination of geolocation and then a programmed list of readers. So when I arrive at work in the morning, when I get to the traffic light in front of our building, it triggers a pathway, and that pathway has front door followed by product management department, following by Dave's office. So you put those readers in as your personal pathway. You can have multiple pathways. It's triggered either by geolocation or I can manually trigger it. When I want to walk back to engineering, I sit at my desk. Before I leave my desk, I trigger the engineering pathway, and then it takes me through the 3 doors that I have to go to get there. So that's another example of signaling intent. Then there's the thing more like tap and go, right? Or twist and go. Either one, where those are signaling intent as well. So we have one that's basically you go to whatever distance you want from a reader. You say, if I'm ever this distance from the reader, then activate the reader. So for the cafeteria has a hallway leading up to it, and there's no other reason I would be in that hallway. It's a dead end other than going through. So when I get 12 feet from that cafeteria door, it just unlocks because there's no other application. I don't loiter in that hall. There's no nearby doors that would get me through. So there's a variety of ways to signal intent. They're not mutually exclusive, meaning I can combine all of those mechanisms. Somebody asked me yesterday, what happens if you're using a pathway and you go off the pathway, you want to go a different direction? Well, then you use the first method of signaling intent. I'm near this reader, you click it. Or I'm touching the reader and you've set it for very low read range or signal strength. It then just touch the reader and it opens. So it's a mix and match scenario, but as I said, of all the things in mobile, from Linnell's perspective, this is the one that's evolving the fastest. And the goal at the end of the day is the Star Trek experience, right? You walk through the ship and the doors just open, and if you're the wrong person, they don't open. And we're not that far off. That's not a 10-year dream. That's in the next year or two, all of us are going to be figuring it out, and it will work that way.
Thank you, David. Scott, would you touch on activation signaling intent for your platform?
Absolutely. So with the Connect platform, the app, you simply touch the soft button that's on the screen of the access credential selected. It releases that credential for a set amount of time, 10 seconds. At that point, it's active. It's either transmitting if it's a long-range reader, or it is waiting for a presentation if it's a short-range reader. So it's a tap to the credential on the screen.
Thank you. And most importantly, Garrett, since you've deployed this and you do have, I believe, some high volume environments, how has this been a play or potentially a pain issue for the activation, the signaling intent portion?
Yeah, as far as activation, we're using the HID platform, so it's either the tap and go or the twist. So we have the twist turned off everywhere except for sliding doors when you're walking up to them. And actually, an interesting way we're using them is for like reception desks. So our medical reception desk will have a door next to them that'll be locked. So they'll have like a vendor come by and they need in. They don't get up, they just pick the phone up and just twist it, and they'll let that vendor route in. So it's been very useful using that instead of like a push button because it's a lot more secure. Yep, yeah, exactly. You don't just reach over the desk and push the button. So.
And has your team actually observed unintentional tailgating where someone has actually opened the door for someone else, non-intentionally, not because they were following with them?
So like the twist and go is only for like those entrances like that, so it's not been really that big of a deal because there's somebody there monitoring that space.
So for you, you've definitely found it selective choice,
Correct.
Selective design has been a big factor.
Yeah, and as far as our users, the app, you just tap it. You don't open the app, you don't do anything, you just tap it, and you're in the door, you're in the space. Because one thing I'll do actually myself, so I'll be on the phone and like, oh crap, I'm at the door. So I'll still be my phone call, just go up the door and just keep on resuming. So
great, thank you.
Nice.
And as David pointed out, having them not be mutually exclusive is a big factor for that complexity. Ed, question.
Okay, guys. So power. Are there specs that you have that say how much power this uses under various conditions, and do they vary by phone?
On the phone side.
On the phone side. So power being used in the phone battery by the technology you're talking about?
No, yes. No, I don't have hard specs, and yes, it varies by phone. The realm of cell phones, their firmware, their BLE usage, I can speak to it broadly in that as BLE advances, the batteries seem to last longer, and I use my phone at trade shows demoing the BLE solution all day long, and I don't run out of battery power. Other people don't have that experience. So I've noticed with my iPhone after an update, I have a current, well, not an iOS 10 or not an iPhone 10, but that after an update, my BLE and my battery wasn't lasting as long. And then there was another update and it seemed to recover. So it's a moving target. That's a really tough thing. It's a great question. I wish I had hard specs to say, you turn this on and we're going to draw this many microamps or however many, and you can do the math and figure out how that affects your battery life. But battery life also is an aging thing as your phone gets older. So the general practical answer is most people are not complaining about that. The thing that's most indicative is that days gone by, we used to shut off our BLE, our Bluetooth, because you didn't want your battery to go to dead. And most people are leaving their Bluetooth on, they're in and out of their car, etc. And so the habits and the phones and the equipment are getting to the point where the battery life isn't the issue really any longer. Again, I have a site in Canada. I'll be, certainly be honest. Their guard said, it kills our batteries, we don't like it, and they shut it off. They don't want to use it. So I have many, many examples of success, but there are people that, for whatever reason, whether it was the beauty in the eye of the beholder, that they felt that was consuming too much of it. I wish I had a spec for you, but I don't, and it does very much vary by phone, is our experience. Guys, do you have something different?
Same experience.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Stand up, please. That way I can see. John, go ahead.
One for David. When we're practicing mustering, if a person has a mobile credential and a physical credential, is the system only accounting for the person, or is it accounting for all credentials?
I'm not sure I can answer that one because I'm not sure whether our mustering works on credentials or on people. I think it's on people, but I honestly would be lying if I said I knew. So I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Sure. And then the second question is probably for Garrett on best practice. If you've got people using mobile credentials, do you account for the physical credentials every so often? Because I have security management who wants to turn off credentials if they're not being used on a regular basis.
Sure. So anybody that has a mobile credential, with the exception of like our contractors and such, if they're internal customer or internal employees, we give them a physical badge too. So I mean, to answer your question, no, we're not really monitoring if they, if they're not bringing it into the office or whatever like that. So to answer your question, it's essentially we treat it as two different credentials for that one employee.
Shep, you had a question? If you'll stand up, please.
Bye. Excuse me. I have a question regarding specification, and this is quite a brain trust here of people that write specs, is that if you have a spec that calls for multi-tier authentication, can you glean off the biometrics on the phone, on the mobile device, and will that satisfy the spec? Just a question.
Jeez.
I don't know if that's a question for us.
It's a shirt tail biometric. I mean, if you're talking about the fingerprint to unlock the iPhone, I happen to know that people with our SDK are working on a two-factor, because you also have a keypad on your phone. Isn't that, pretty convenient? To be all of those things could be brought to play where, in order to use this credential, the closest thing that we, HID, can really speak to two-factor authentication is the phone needs to be unlocked. And so if you can give me the leeway to say that that's one factor, that someone who had to either know that code or have that fingerprint to unlock the phone, then the answer is, yeah, I'm kind of sort of doing two-factor authentication. Is the app itself controlling that? At this stage, we have people working on it, but we don't do that. So that would be my most honest answer.
Ditto.
And so I'll add on to that. When we really talk about multi-factor authentication, clearly mobile can support that in many venues, but it is device specific in addition to app specific. So have you had the case where you've actually been asked to force multi-factor authentication for the mobile credential, and how were you able to achieve that?
Actually, it's a common request. We run into problems with, we run into problems with the administration of an app on someone's private phone. People want, IT wants to be able to say, we want to control the various features that are turned on or turned off on that app. Unfortunately, our app, or fortunately, I'm sure you folks went through it too, our app had to go through Apple's testing procedure, and before you can get an app on the iTunes store, you know, it's an expensive and lengthy and iterative process, several things. No, we didn't like that, change that. I guess it was kind of painful. Once we got the app approved, boom, you rubber stamp it. But the IT people want to be able to say, well, we want to shut this feature off across all of them. We have an SDK that allows them to change the image, put a logo on that to be able to personalize it, but the feature set to keep us from going through testing, it's static. So that is a common request, and the individual could, for instance, go into their app and turn off Twist and Go, no problem. You can go into the reader and turn off Twist and Go. You can adjust the range. But can corporate download and manage feature sets on a per person basis? The answer is no, we can't.
Scott, David, do you either have a case where forced multi-factor authentication, you've been requested and addressed that?
It actually is on our roadmap to do that. I think I agree with Dean, though, that there are some limitations both from corporate policy standpoint and also from the operating system, particularly Apple, which is very restrictive. I'm not sure that Apple actually allows you to require a biometric. I've never seen an app that didn't say, do you want to use Touch ID? I've never seen one that says you have to use Touch ID except Apple's own apps. It may be possible. So we are looking at that. But I will point out that two-factor authentication is completely doable. Using mobile as one of those and using non-mobile as another. So for example, you have a pin pad reader. With OnGuard, you can say, as I'm walking up, when I'm 10 feet away, register that mobile credential, count that as the first factor, and then require, the light will start flashing to enter your PIN. So that'd be two-factor using mobile as one. Similarly, we're actually working with biometric vendors to incorporate Blue Diamond mobile and biometric readers where you walk up and it's ready for your finger. So it looks almost like a one-to-many, but it's really a one-to-one match because the thing will be able to just put your finger on and say go. So there's a number of ways to get multi-factor using OnGuard and mobile.
Sure, just like with Linnell and HID, we're also on our roadmap, we're looking at multi-factor identification, so utilizing the keypad. One of the nice things with BLE is the reader can actually signal, as Dave, as you alluded to, can actually signal the app to bring up the keypad, so it prompts the user to enter their PIN pad, enter their PIN. It's also nice as you may be able to use pins of various lengths. You could trigger the camera, you could trigger the microphone. There's a plethora of things that can be brought on. Furthermore, just like the other gentleman here, we also have an SDK, and it allows different end users that may have an app, for example, in hotel situations. You may want to integrate the access control rights for the maid's app. So each time a maid goes into a room, they would utilize the access control to gain electronic access to gain access to the room. And then the app would trigger them to follow a protocol on how to clean the room or service the room properly. So that sort of thing is pretty common too. We've had those requests from universities as well as some corporate campuses.
Thank you. Question, Jim?
I haven't heard anybody mention cost. And that we save on reproduction of cards and things like that. But what is your cost model for this product? If I get a card, I'm not asking you the price. Let's say it's $6. Do I have to come back the next year and get that thing redone again? And secondly, how do you deal with lost car or lost mobile phones? Do I have to buy another credential, or can I reassign that credential? And the final question, I think for you, would be, how do you deal with dead batteries?
Gary, want to go first?
You don't.
Well, mine's easy. So if your battery's dead, you can't get in, and I don't know what to tell you. Like,
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
That's good enough.
we also give them physical badges too, so they should carry their badge as well. So.
Sure. Hey, Jim, I'll try to address your questions. So on if a phone is lost with a credential on it, how would they get a new credential? Well, I think it's the same as for a physical access credential. They would have to request one from their security department. In fact, it's probably incumbent that they do, so that if you lose your phone and it has a credential on it, you'll want to disable that credential within the access control system.
Why couldn't that be done as the guy applies for a new card?
Oh, that could be done for the guy who applies for a new card as well. That absolutely, that could. But they'll want to bring that up to the security team there at their respective access point. In regards to the pricing on what a replacement credential costs or something of that nature, it's really a business discussion. We're in the business of selling credentials and readers. If somebody loses one, love to sell them another one. But understand too that smartphones turn over rather quickly. People may want to have a credential that lasts into perpetuity onto it. We could make amends to make that happen. We do all sorts of different types of deals. So we're pretty flexible.
Dean?
Yep. So up until about 2 months ago, I had an answer. You downloaded a credential, it married itself to the phone. If you lost that phone or needed a new phone, you had to buy a new credential. So those do not expire, to your point, every year. As long as you have that device, that credential is alive and it's yours.
One-time payment.
One-time payment, correct. No annual maintenance fee or anything like that. We've recently put out a pool, I think as to use your vernacular, we call it a subscription service, where instead of licensing or purchasing a thing, you buy an annual subscription that allows you to have up to 10 credentials on 5 different devices. So you have different numbers and IDs for that annual subscription. And that does cost you, as the name implies, every year. That addresses several things that we didn't do a very good job with our permanent install type scenario. Visitors, contractors, with universities, they have a class that's coming in for a week. Selling them that permanent credential was a little heavy-handed. Now what we do when we're dealing with an office building and we want to talk about visitor management, we tell them, you know what, keep an eye on it, try to give us a feel for how many visitors you have on premise on any given day. 10? All right, why don't you buy 15 extra subscriptions, and those can be revoked and passed back and forth as much as, and then they have kind of 5 in the bank, if you will. So that's how we're doing it for now. You can have both in the environment. You can have permanent credentials and subscriptions. Long-term roadmap, the permanent credential may go away. We have not been told definitively, but the go forward, it appears that the subscription model is more popular. If it gets to the point where no one's buying the permanent credential because of what you stated, you know, people churn rate on phones every 18 months or whatever, you know, it is. My kids want a new phone every time a new one's released. If that falls out of favor, you know, we may choose to just end that program. We're not going to take away any credentials that are out there that people have, but we may stop selling those. So the subscription model, as it appears today, looks like that will be the most popular.
David?
From Linnell's standpoint, it's very simple. We only offer the one model, which is the pool model. It gives your end users complete freedom. We don't micromanage their business. We don't do anything except say there's a limit to how many credentials you can have in use at once. If somebody gets a new phone, there's no charge. A visitor leaves and another visitor comes in, there's no charge. It's just what's the same as what Dean said. You know, you need a pool that's big enough to accommodate the number of credentials in circulation at one time, and beyond that, there's complete freedom.
So you don't expire the card, in other words? I know the access system
It's annual, yes. It is a subscription.
They
Yeah.
don't pay their bill. There's a
Yes.
subscription fee
Yeah, well,
annually?
yes, you pay.
That's a big deal.
Yes, you pay, and again, we talk to customers. Actually, HID had their previous model, and the feedback we got when we introduced this product was, don't do that. And I think that HID has validated that feedback. So the feedback from our customers is, we don't want you, first of all, charging every time somebody gets a new phone. That's a penalty for getting a new phone. So when I was selling against HID's old model, I would say HID has a subscription. It's a 18-month subscription. It's when you get a new phone, you have to buy a new credential. Why is that? And so, although you may not like a subscription model, you may also not like a subscription model for Netflix or for lots of other things. So, the world is going to a subscription model, and we feel, and you'll notice all three of us have cloud services, right? And it is not financially viable to pay annually for something you're giving away forever. It just doesn't, the math doesn't work. So as long as something is cloud-based, it's going to be a subscription model.
Thank you, David. Dave, you had a question?
So,
would you mind standing up, Dave?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
My back. So the process, so I need to get a new phone. And one of the things that's always been a little sketchy for me is when I go to AT&T and they hook my old phone through the little magic box that then transfers everything over. Now, do those keys drop on that transfer, or is it going to reprovision, or do I have to go to you on the cloud or go to my security manager and say, hey, give me my access back?
There may be different answers from all three of us. In HID's case, there's no way to transfer a permanent credential from phone to phone. That was one of the early release design concepts. This was not by accident. We didn't want any chance of vulnerabilities of cloning, et cetera. So when the credential installs itself on the phone, it senses, it goes out and reads certain unique identifiers of the phone, and it marries itself to that phone. So should that credential get hacked, copied any other way to some other device, it's not going to work. So that answers the permanent credential. In the pool credential, the same security is there, again, so that somebody cannot clone that. But in the subscription model, you say, I've lost this phone, or I'm getting a new phone. You're actually getting a new credential, under the hood. The old one is killed, but we don't reuse that number. So there again, that's maintaining that security.
Scott or David, is your path different?
Ours is not different either. You would lose those credentials.
David?
Ours is completely different. So I'm in a different position also, though, because I make an access control software system and not just the readers and credentials. So we have a little more control over the environment, and we also offer a little more flexibility. So with OnGuard, you can decide whether mobile credentials, when they're reissued, whether you issue the same person the same badge number or a different badge number. And so we have the payload of the mobile credential is independent from the credential. I think you guys mentioned that also, that you can put different data into it. So the data is your badge ID. The badge ID isn't unique for the mobile credential. It's stored in the mobile credential, the badge ID that gets passed by Wiegand or OSDP. So if you get a new phone, I don't really care if you got a new phone. As your employer, I just want to allow you to transfer the credential to your new phone. So what we do in OnGuard, we have the ability, there's a function called issue mobile credential, which is for a new issuance, or reissue mobile credential. And when you reissue a mobile credential, it deactivates the old one and sends an email to you, and you just plug that in on your phone, you click a link in the email, and it activates on your new phone. It would typically have the same badge number, it doesn't have to, but typically that's how it'd be configured, is to use the same badge number. So from my standpoint as your employer, I don't care which phone it is. I know it can only exist on one because that's the way the technology works. So we just issue it. Under the hood, it actually, as Dean's system works also, it does have a different ID for the credential itself. It just passes the same badge number to the access control system. So it's handled very smoothly. We also have a self-service portal for employees in OnGuard. So if you have a large, if your end user has a large installed base, then the administrators don't even need to get involved in the mobile credential issuance. It can be done if this is something that they want to avail themselves with and they're comfortable with. Then the people can log in through their corporate Active Directory account, any card holder, and say, I want to move the credential to a new phone, and it will deactivate on the old phone, so there's never more than one in circulation of that person's badge, but they can move it from phone to phone as they wish, if that's allowed in corporate policies.
Thank you, David. We have time for one last question. It looks like it's a loaded question from Rick back here.
One more? Okay, okay. Now, I see some great solutions here, you know, from 3 different vendors. Has there been any movement towards open standards? So I don't have to buy your readers and credentials or your readers and credentials. Can I mix and match at some point in time? Is there any movement towards that, you know, nirvana?
Great question.
Well, were you in the earlier OSDP conversation? Because the transparent mode potentially could get you there. So what we're talking about, for those that weren't in the OSDP conversation, the readers can be put into what is called transparent mode, where there is no handshake between the credential and the reader. That's where the security keys live in most scenarios. In transparent mode, that's moved to the device upstream, be it an access control panel or a time clock or what have you. So you have keys, we need keys, you know, it's an encrypted communication, so there has to be keys on both sides. Where the keys reside with transparent mode is transferred, it's moved. We are become just an antenna at that point, and you said, you know, I see you, in this case phone, I see this ID, I have no idea how to unpack it or decrypt it. I pass that up to the control panel, and the control panel decrypts and sends a message back or not. That's as close as I can get to an open standard today. But again, the whole idea about being proprietary and open, if I may just get on my soapbox a minute, at the end of the day, since these are encrypted and secured devices, be it cards, be it readers, someone has to lock the card. Someone has to apply a security key. We don't really care who does that. We can do it at the factory. Happy to do that. You can assign keys by telling us we have an elite program where either you can submit your own keys and we'll inject them for you, or you can field program them. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to lock it. And whoever locks it can be, I guess, accused of making that proprietary to them because they know the key. Open standards, we need that mechanism to get you there of how are we going to get the keys on the card, how are we going to get the keys in the reader. If you don't want HID involved, cool, go transparent mode and give me a device and that you can talk to, and I guess I can kind of sort of get you to that open standard.
Scott, David, do you have some insight on this?
Rick, great question. I'll answer your question, sort of. With mobile credentials, the handset, so the smartphone actually becomes the access credential. A couple of weeks ago, I happened to be in Southern California and dropped in on one of our partners. That said partner sells reader solutions from, Dean, what's the name of your company? I've forgotten again. That's right. From HID. Just slipped my mind there. And then they also sell mobile credentials from a third company. It's not Blue Diamond, but if you look globally, there's literally hundreds of these mobile credential solutions out there now. They asked the same question. Oh, will your reader be able to read all of them? I said, well, I don't think so, not in the near term. Part of the reason, and Dean, you hinted on it, there's a lot of encryption that goes around each of these credentials. So even if you're just moving 26 bits of data, you're encrypting it with AES 128. I mean, these numbers they're huge that you'd look to manage. So we looked at it a different way. So I said, you know what, let's try to load our application on your smartphone. So this gentleman downloaded our application on the smartphone. He was running the HID application. He was also running this other application. Downloaded a credential right there. He actually had HID mobile credentials, he had our mobile credentials, and he had this third-party mobile credentials all operating on his same smartphone. He was able to take it, move it around his building, and test it on the different readers that were there. It was actually kind of cool. So in a sense, Do you have to be able to read all these? I'm not really certain you do. But in the future, perhaps. It all uses the BLE channel.
David, did you have a comment on this?
Sure. We actually had a vendor come in to propose an open solution to us that we had to pay them for each credential to issue, and then it would work across multiple readers. Sounds nothing like an open solution to me. And the answer is exactly the same as what Dean said, which is, and Scott, is that there is security, and somebody has to own the key. And basically the idea that this vendor proposed was to have a clearinghouse, essentially, that would issue key ranges and things like that. But it's just a lot of complexity to achieve the same thing. I really agree with Scott's perspective on this, maybe with one enhancement, which is there's credentials and then there's apps, and those are two different things. We all have an app, and we all have a credential that goes into the app. It's conceivable, I think where this might go is you may end up having a wallet. It may be the Apple wallet, maybe somebody else's wallet, that can store credentials from across multiple reader types, maybe automatically detect what reader you're near and pull up the right credential. I don't know that credentials are going to end up being open and interoperable, but I think that a phone can house multiple credentials and transparently use them as appropriate.
Right.
One quick follow-up. How about wireless locks?
That's another
I saw some, no, it's a follow-up because it's kind of open, but it's not. I mean, I saw that the Blue Diamond now has an ASA alloy. So that's like the first baby step. But how about Scott? You know, what wireless locks you going to work with, or you guys working together, or, you know, the end user has to know that it's not just the reader, the credential is used in other places as well.
There it is. Great question. Yes. We're working on a module as well, so it allow lock sets to be BLE enabled. At the moment, the Dormicaba lock sets can function with some of our with our mobile app as well. So there is some functionality there. We're looking to expand that in the future.
Great. Well, again, this format and this subject is definitely of great interest to us. If you like this subject matter, please rate on your feedback form appropriately. If you want to hear more of this for next year's consult, please write so. We can address integrated lock sets, the future of this, whatever topics you want to deal with, mobile credentials, card credential technology, please provide that feedback. Special thanks to Emma for helping out with the Q&A section. Thank you for volunteering. If you will, please thank our panelists, Garrett, Scott, Dean, David. Please stand up and thank them for their time.